And outdoor and feral cats, or better known as the community cat problem. So first, let's just talk about what community cats are. It's basically a term used to refer to outdoor cats that are unowned, so they don't have an owner or a person who keeps them in their house. They're free roaming, so they usually fall into one of two categories, either stray or feral. Some are friendly, some might be more cautious, some might not be socialized whatsoever and want nothing to do with people. They come in pretty much any age, any health status, so some might be sick, some might be fairly healthy, some might be well fed, others might be kind of struggling to find food. They may or may not have a caregiver. So a caregiver is kind of different than an owner. An owner would be bringing their cat inside, at least for some of the time, whereas a caregiver is probably just someone who feeds them, maybe gives them like a little cat house or bed for some shelter. So the only cats that aren't considered community cats are those who have an owner. So cats with owners are generally either indoor cats or outdoor cats. Indoor cats remain in the household for a majority of their lives. They might be let out for very short periods of time, but that's always supervised and in a controlled setting. So some people with indoor cats, might let their cat on their back porch for just a couple of minutes, but they're standing right there. We still don't really recommend that. We'll get into why that can be a little hazardous, but outdoor cats are allowed to roam outside for long periods of unsupervised time. So that's more like opening your back door and telling your cat, all right, have a great day, have fun, good luck out there. And there's a lot of issues that come from that. It's obviously very dangerous for the cat, but it can be a nuisance to your neighbors, and it's actually illegal in most neighborhoods, at least in DuPage County. So you really should not be letting your cat outdoors unsupervised at any point in time. But if you ever see cats that are just kind of roaming your street or your community, those might be someone's outdoor cat. So what's the problem? Like I said, it is illegal and with good reason. Outdoor cats encounter a number of different dangers because they're basically roaming outside for very long periods of time. Most people who have outdoor cats probably let them for a couple of hours at minimum, could be, a day or two maximum. But the very long periods of time where the cat is not around people and can run into some serious dangers. They could be hit by a car. That's obviously one of the biggest dangers to any animal outside. Cars are going at very high speeds, and if a little cat wanders into the street, obviously it will not end pretty well. So we want to make sure that we're not letting cats outside because cars are definitely something that's hard for them to avoid. They don't understand how to cross the street, and unfortunately, not everyone is able to stop for the animal in time. But in addition to big, scary cars, there's also other animals. So outdoor cats sometimes get into fights with their neighbors' pets. If someone else has an outdoor cat and those two cats don't get along, they could hurt each other. Or if someone is letting their dog outside, even in a fenced yard, cats are really good at squeezing through small spaces. They can climb, so they can find their way into different people's yards, even if they're not supposed to be there, and cause fights with people's pets. So it's really not responsible to let cats outdoors because they're going to find a way onto other people's property, and that in turn could cause some other issues. Um, so aside from people's pets, there's also lots of different wild animals out there. Coyotes are definitely a big one that would easily be able to overpower a cat, but even more smaller size or medium sized wild animals like raccoons and possums, they have really sharp claws, they have sharp teeth, they can easily scratch or bite and really do a lot of damage to a cat that's being let outdoors. And there's also diseases that these wild animals and other pets may be spreading to each other. So they might pick up rabies or distemper are the two big ones, but there's plenty of parasites, fleas, and other diseases related to mosquitoes and ticks that cats can easily get from wild animals or other animals being let outside. So, also, there's an unfortunate thing to think about that not everybody likes cats. And like I mentioned, sometimes outdoor cats find their way into people's yards. And while this is not the right thing to do by any means, some people do try to leave traps or poison out for these cats so that it will end the problem in their mind. But obviously, that's inhumane, it's hurting the cat, but it still is a hazard for people to think about before they just let their cat outdoors unsupervised. There's lots of dangers, and there's no real way to know what your cat might encounter while it's outside. But wait, it gets even worse. Not only are there a lot of dangers to the cats, but they themselves are a danger to other animals. Cats that are outdoors often hunt small animals like mice, chipmunks, voles, and especially birds. So it's important to remember that cats are both predators and prey. They might be hunted by some animals, but they also do a lot of the hunting themselves. And while we might consider, mice or birds pests, depending on the situation, the outdoor cats still really impact their populations and can cause the species numbers to go down, and really cause an impact on how well the species is doing. It's estimated that outdoor cats across the country kill anywhere from 1 to 4 billion birds per year. Cats are extremely smart, they're agile, so even though birds can fly, cats like to sneak up and can, really impact their populations because that's what they're doing for most of the time that they're outside. They're letting out that hunting instinct. But cats aren't native to the United States. They're not native to this environment and they don't belong there. So because we're putting an animal like a cat that doesn't belong in that environment, it can really upset that delicate balance, and that's why we see them heavily impact bird and small mammal populations. But a lot of people think, well, they always come home, right? And cats do have a phenomenal sense of direction, and some outdoor cats do find their way back home on a regular basis. Like I mentioned, some outdoor cats go for their, unsupervised time for several hours. Some it might be a couple of days. And while they seem to be able to find their way back to the home, that doesn't prevent any kind of unforeseen circumstance from happening that might help them get lost. So, like we mentioned, there's lots of dangers out there. We're not sure what might happen to a cat while they're outdoors unsupervised. So, for example, if a wild animal tried to hunt them, it would cause the cat to get really scared and run off because it's trying to protect itself and save its life. And if it veered from its usual path because it was so scared and needed to get away, it might not know the way back and become lost. So it really doesn't take a lot for a cat to, have something go wrong and for them to get lost. And now what do? Cats rely on people for their basic needs. So if they become lost outside, there's even more dangers that can really affect them. Cats obviously need healthy food and fresh water. They rely on people for these things, so even if they are getting some food and water from outside, it's probably not healthy or fresh or in good condition. But it's still a struggle. They have to hunt in order to maintain themselves if they're lost and can't find their way home. So many lost cats become dehydrated or end up starving, unfortunately. They also need a warm, safe shelter, which is very hard to come by when you're dealing with the outdoors. So if there's any kind of extreme weather, it'd be really easy for a cat to overheat or to get hypothermia. If it's cold and snowy or even rain, when it's really hot in the summertime, there's no way for a cat to escape from those conditions. So they would have to deal with that, and that could obviously really impact their health or harm them. And especially, it's just good to remember they would miss their owners as they enjoy our companionship. While cats are more independent animals, they're not group-centric animals like dogs, but they still rely on that companionship. They still like to have people around. They, purr for a reason and meow for a reason because they know that we're their guardians and should be taking care of them, and they want to express that love in return. So we really want to make sure we are the ones providing for their needs, not letting the cats outside so they can fend for themselves. So, like I kind of mentioned, if an outdoor cat that is someone's pet becomes lost, they now become or are considered a stray animal. So any animal that's lost is a stray, pretty much. Stray animals might be picked up by animal control. Their job is to check for a collar and or microchip in order to locate the animal's owner. So if they don't find a microchip, they have a microchip scanner. If nothing comes up and there was no collar found on the animal, animal control will hold them for about 5 to 7 days. They'll post the animal's picture online. People are allowed to call in. If they find their pet on the animal control website, or if they're just trying to call different places to see if anyone's picked up their pet. But if no one comes to claim that animal within the 5 to 7 days, it's pretty much assumed that the owner isn't looking or isn't going to come forward. So they're usually put up for adoption after the 5 to 7 days or transferred to another shelter. Um, so if your outdoor cat doesn't have a collar or microchip, and you don't go looking for it at the different animal controls in your area, it may end up becoming someone else's pet. And like I mentioned, there's really no way to tell the difference between a stray cat and an outdoor cat. To animal control, outdoor cats are breaking the law. All animals found outside are kind of considered strays. How are we to know if they're lost or not? And it's really unsafe for cats to be let outside unsupervised. Not only illegal, it's unsafe for the cat's sake. So, just a heads up that if animal control finds your cat, they may end up, holding it for 5 to 7 days, and then it could get adopted if no one comes forward. So even for indoor cats, we always want to make sure that we're microchipping them. Even all pets should be microchipped. It is the best way to make sure your animal is returned to you because it's permanent. Basically, it's implanted under the skin, and like I said, we use a microchip scanner. So no matter what, that identification and way of bringing the animal back to its owner can never be removed from the animal. Whereas a collar is nice, it's quick and easy to check, but it can fall off. And actually for cats, it's always recommended to use breakaway collars, which basically have a little clasp that easily comes apart when there's some pressure pulling it. So if a cat ever got stuck like in a fence, they wouldn't choke themselves or hurt themselves. If they pulled a little bit, the collar would break open so that the cat, like I said, wouldn't get stuck and put in further danger. But a microchip is permanent, so always the best thing for any dog or cat to have. So where do the feral cats come in? That's kind of a buzzword you hear lots of people talk about, is feral cats. So basically, if we have outdoor cats that get lost and become stray cats, and those cats were never spayed or neutered, the problem becomes even bigger. If you remember about the last lesson and discussion that we had, which was all about pet overpopulation and spay-neuter, you'll see that there are very proven statistics that spay and neuter prevent animals from becoming overpopulated and can really have a profound impact in bringing down shelter populations, as well as they just provide health and behavior benefits to the individual animal. So spay and neuter, we say spay for female, neuter for males, but they're both surgeries that prevent an animal from having babies. And if cats aren't having babies, then they're not contributing to the overpopulation problem. So let's say when an outdoor cat or stray cat that's not spayed or neutered starts to breed, if their kittens are never exposed to humans, that's a cat that would be considered feral. So feral basically means an animal that is in a wild-like state, especially after a type of escape from captivity or domestication. So I put the word escape in quotes because it's not like they're trying to get out of being domesticated. It's more that people weren't taking care of them, and that process starts to revert back. So feral, like I said, is a wild-like state, but it's kind of an animal that was domesticated, reverting back to its wild instincts. Feral and wild are not the same thing, because wild animals like lions have always been wild, whereas feral animals come from a domesticated species. So cats have been domesticated for a long period of time, but if they're never exposed to humans, then they are feral, because that kind of will cause those instincts to become stronger, and they're just very fearful because they were never around people, and it has to be within the first 8 weeks of life, or else they will never want people to come near them. They can't go into a home with a family, they can't be put into a shelter for adoption. Really, they don't want anything to do with people. Some might even, defend themselves because they see people as a threat. Um, yeah, they may scratch or hiss to ward off threats. It's very important to understand that feral is undoing that human-animal bond to a certain extent and causing the cats to never want to be around people. So we don't want that to happen. If we weren't letting cats outdoors unsupervised, then we wouldn't have stray cats that are not spayed and neutered that have babies that become feral. So if we take a look at the next slide, you can kind of see that it's a process. If you start with an outdoor cat and that cat gets lost, doesn't find its way home, then it becomes a stray cat. If that cat is intact, meaning it wasn't spayed or neutered, then it's able to have babies. And those babies are feral cats because they've never been exposed to people. And if they're not around people within the first 8 weeks, they'll never be able to live with people. So it takes a long time to domesticate an animal, but it's a fairly quick process to do the reverse and cause a lot of damage. So where do all the cats come from? Basically, the problem, or to add to the problem, is that cats can breed very, very quickly, multiple times a year, and starting at a pretty extremely young age. Cats reach sexual maturity around 6 months, but they can become pregnant as early as 4 months. And the gestation period, or how long the pregnancy takes, is only about 2 months, 58 to 67 days. So that's a lot of pregnancies that can happen in a single year. Cats can become pregnant after they give birth to a litter 1 month in between. So it takes 2 months for the kittens to develop. The mom needs at least a month to kind of recover, and then she's able to get pregnant again. So this would total up to around 4 pregnancies a year, and then when we consider that each pregnancy is likely to have at least 4 to 6 kittens, the numbers are staggering and overwhelming very, very quickly. And this is why spay and neuter are so important to managing populations for both dogs and cats. If we spay and neuter, then we're preventing a lot of unwanted litters of puppies and kittens, and those numbers will dramatically decrease. Whereas if we have an intact female cat, in just 1 year, she would be able to give birth to 16 or more kittens. And then those 16 kittens will begin breeding at, sorry, that should say 6 months of age, but it will take, 2 months for each litter, and that would add another 36 kittens of their own. So the females' kittens add to the problem as well. And we would have 52 cats resulting from a single unspayed female cat in the span of 1 year. So if we're not spaying and neutering, it's if you guys have studied in math, exponential. Basically, the more cats that aren't spayed and neutered, the more cats they can make, and so on and so forth. It'll just keep getting worse and worse. But if we had spayed that female cat, we would only have the 1 cat to worry about. So that's why spay and neuter are so important and so effective. So what do you do with the feral cats? Since the number of cats can become overwhelming, like I mentioned, if they're not spayed or neutered, you see community cat colonies. So basically, when we say a community cat colony, it means a group of cats living within that area or community. And because the feral cats are born outside, they're not spayed or neutered, and they're adding to the problem as well. Um, they, like I said, kind of prefer a certain area because cats are very territorial. So most cats, when we're talking about community cats, are feral, but they may include some outdoor cats or strays as well. And since feral cats can't live with people, they aren't able to be adopted through shelters, as I mentioned, or taken in as someone's pet. If they are semi-approachable, they might be able to live on a farm or in a barn where they can hunt the mice that feed on the livestock food, but they'll never be able to live in a household. That would be an extremely stressful and scary setting for them because they don't want anything to do with people. Like I said, we've kind of undone that process of domestication. So feral cats really have to live outside, whereas uh, pet cats, they don't need to live outside. They are domesticated animals and are happier indoors, whereas feral cats don't want anything to do with people. So it limits their options as to where they can go. And they're kind of used to that area and their territory, right? So they know the setting and those resources. And that's why most animal welfare groups, shelters, rescues, and different animal organizations will always recommend TNR, or Trap, Neuter, Return. It's a very effective and humane option for dealing with community cats. So there's just 3 steps, but it is important to note that this is a collaborative or team effort by the local animal control, shelters and rescues, and veterinarians as an effort to manage their community cats. So we start by setting humane traps throughout the community. Basically, it's a little trap where once the cat goes inside, it might set off a weight system and close behind them. Usually it'll tempt them with some food and they'll be able to kind of snack, until someone comes to pick up the trap. So once the cat's in the trap safely, we transport them to a facility. Could be a vet office, or an animal shelter, but someplace where they'll be able to fully check out the animal and give them everything they need. Which brings us to our second step. After we trap the cats, they undergo neuter or spay, they get vaccinations, and a general checkup. So we want to make sure that the community cats are healthy, they're getting vaccinated to prevent spreading disease to each other or wild animals, other people's pets, and most importantly, like we've talked about, making sure that they're spayed or neutered so that they cannot have kittens and cause the problem to get worse. So after they recover and, before I forget, let's talk about the pictures. So after they get neutered, they're under anesthesia while they get the surgery. The veterinarian will clip part of their ear. So that's what you see in the 2 pictures on the left there. Obviously, feral cats aren't someone's pet, but it's still important to know that they've been through this process. So while they don't get a microchip or collar or anything, if you see a cat where just the little tip off of its ear has been cut off, and like I said, it's done under anesthesia, they don't feel it, think of it like an ear piercing, basically. That heals up just fine, and then you always know if you see a cat missing the tip of its ear that it was through the TNR process and wouldn't have to go through it again. So the last step after they're neutered or spayed, vaccinated, get the general checkup, and their ear tipped is they get to recover, and then they have to be returned and released to the exact same spot. And we're going to talk about why that's so important. It needs to be the exact same location. You can't just release the cat wherever you feel like it. And it's one of the most crucial steps because, like I said, those cats are used to that environment and the resources there. Moving them elsewhere might confuse them or put them in more danger than they're already in because they have to figure out this whole new environment and find out where the food and safe places to hide and things like that. It would basically cause them to start over. So it could be a big challenge for them. But it's also important that we always return cats to the exact same spot because it prevents other community cats from taking their place. So let's say I was doing a TNR program, and I trapped and neutered all of the cats, and now I was going to return them, but I figured, hey, what if I just drive them all to Chicago and leave them there? They can deal with them. Um, the community, this wouldn't solve the problem because community cats from the other surrounding neighborhoods like Downers Grove, Plainfield, Aurora, they would start to see, hey, there's no cats in Naperville, so why don't I go eat the food? There's plenty of food and plenty of space over there. So cats from surrounding areas will always take advantage of those resources if the other cats that were there are just simply removed. And also, it's obviously unfair and ineffective to just take those cats and dump them in Chicago. Chicago probably has their own feral cat problem that they're dealing with, so it's important that communities take responsibility for their own community cats, not try to dump them on another community or ever use inhumane methods such as just killing the cats. Obviously, that's wrong for moral reasons, but it's also ineffective because, like I said, if we just move or remove the community cats in a certain area, other cats will take their place. But TNR addresses those things and brings the population numbers down over time, so it would allow those cats to live to where they're used to without opening up those resources for others to move in. And though it's not ideal for, cats to be living outside for any reason, like we said, there's really nowhere else for the feral cats to go. And at least if they've been through the TNR process, they won't be adding to the overpopulation problem or spreading disease. So if you still are thinking, well, cats are wild and cats have strong instincts and my cat can figure out how to navigate cars going 50 miles an hour, which is highly doubtful, but if you're still thinking that you know best, that cats should be able to go outdoors, you're right that cats are more wild than certain other domesticated animals, but they are still domesticated. And every animal has strong instincts that help them survive. And as humans, it's up to us to respect that and allow them to display those instincts in a safe way. Cats have been domesticated for around 7,000 years. While dogs, we think it's closer to 15,000 years, 7,000 years is still an extremely long time for an animal to be living alongside humans. So if you see, domestication is a very long process where a species becomes reliant on humans over several generations or thousands of years. So when I say several generations, that means that originally we might have started with big cats that weren't used to people, but their kittens get used to people a little bit more, and then those kittens are more used to people yet, and so on and so forth. It takes several generations of babies in order for a domestication process to happen, or thousands of years. Uh, and remember, cats are domesticated, not wild, but reversing an animal back to feral doesn't take much time at all. Really only a generation or two, or, less than a year, since cats can have up to 4 pregnancies in a year. If you start with an intact outdoor cat that becomes a stray and then has kittens outside, those kittens will likely be feral if they've never been exposed to people. So reversing a process that takes thousands of years can quickly revert back and really do a lot of damage. And while some cats really might enjoy the outdoors, they don't need to be let outside to display their natural instincts because there's too many dangers. As I mentioned, cats are both predators and prey. So while it is important to give them an outlet for them to hunt and display those instincts, it's not worth it at the cost of them getting hit by a car or getting a serious disease or attacked by a wild animal, or harming, the birds in our neighborhood either and the environment. So as long as we're providing indoor cats with their basic needs, they can live very happily and safely. All they really need is a warm, safe place to sleep. Cats also like to perch and hide, so if they have a bed where they can, cuddle and get all warm and cozy, or a windowsill or cat tree where they can kind of climb up high and look over things, both of those are really important to making a cat feel safe and like it's their home and their territory. And cats obviously prefer when there's multiple areas. So if you have several cat beds or, like I mentioned, windowsills, cats might have a few different windowsills around your house that they like to look out of. And just making sure that they get plenty of exercise with toys. I know my cat at home, I can't even count the number of toys that she has because she loves to play, and it's good for her. It allows that energy outlet and helps keep her healthy by giving her exercise. So make sure that no matter if you have a more laid back cat that kind of might just chase the toy for a couple of minutes, or a cat that is very active and likes to play for long periods of time, you need to play with your cat every day. And it's a bonding experience. That should be one of the reasons you wanted to get a cat, is because they're so goofy and enjoy the play that you should want to provide that for your animal. That's our job as humans and their guardians. And really, with exercise and proper diet, a cat won't become overweight. And like I mentioned, they'll have that outlet for their energy and instincts as long as they have some toys and some places to feel like it's their own. And if you really think that your cat would like to spend time outside, there are ways to compromise. So never ever should you just let a cat outside unsupervised for long periods of time. Never open your back door and say, "Have a good day, Fluffy. I'll see you tonight," because you don't know what's going to happen. But if you think that your cat does like the breeze and the smells and the stimulation from the outdoors, you can bring an indoor cat outside for supervised time. And there's a couple of pictures showing you ways that you can do that. I know the cat backpacks have become popular over the past couple of years, and basically there's just some air holes and a little window where you can see the cat's face there. Um, so you would just walk around with your cat, and they can be smelling, what's going on outside. They can see everything around them, so that's a good option. Here is a picture of our volunteer, Sonia, with her cat Sputnik, who is actually a therapy cat. So she visits people in nursing homes and different places of need where she makes them feel better and just gives them that companionship. But it's important that cats that are traveling around for whatever reason are doing it safely. So that's why Sonia and Sputnik have their own cat stroller. And Sputnik likes to ride around in that. And then if you take a look over here, some people are building catios, which are basically like screened-in porches or just little windowsill extensions where a cat can walk around outside, but it's got this chicken wire or some kind of fencing to make sure that nothing can get in and hurt the cat, and the cat can't get out. So this is a really nice option if you want to just let your cat get some fresh breeze whenever they feel like it. Um, and then finally, we have leash and harness training. This might be one of the more challenging options because not every cat is going to like the harness and leash. It does take quite a bit of time to get them acquainted with it as well. So even cats that will walk on a leash and harness, you need to expose them to the harness beforehand without taking them outside or putting it on them. It's more of getting them acquainted with it, slowly getting them more comfortable, then starting to put it on and walk on the leash indoors, and eventually taking them outside. And it's also important to remember that cats aren't like dogs. So even though they might put up with the leash and harness, they're not going to walk nice and perfectly in a straight line, just go in their focused direction. Cats are kind of all over the place when they're on the leash because there's so many things that they're trying to take in. So don't expect them to walk really nice like a little cartoon dog. They'll probably just kind of plop down in certain places and get really hyper and bounce around in others. So just let your cat go with the flow and enjoy that time because you're there to make sure they're being safe. So it's really important that all cats, even if they're going to be kept indoors their entire life, not even use any of these compromise situations, all cats should be microchipped. Like I said, that's the best way to make sure that your cat or dog or any pet is always returned to you. Spaying and neutering prevents a lot of unwanted litters, whether it's inside or outside, and it's healthier for each individual animal. So make sure we're spaying and neutering all cats. keeping them up to date on their vaccinations, especially rabies and distemper, and then giving them a flea and tick preventative. Fleas and ticks carry lots of diseases as well, so if we give them a once a month preventative, like Frontline or Canine Advantix, then you don't have to worry about fleas and ticks or the diseases that they bring along. So doing those simple things for all animals really makes a big difference, because then your cat, even if they accidentally got outside, would be covered from those dangers and quickly return to you because of the microchip. Whoops. Thought there was one more. There we go. So here's just a couple of before and after pictures. So remember, cats are always happiest inside a home with their owners, because they don't have to deal with all those dangers and fend for themselves. They're able to get everything they need and feel safe and secure. So you can see this little kitten here really looked pretty rough, probably has some kind of disease. Its eyes don't look very clear, and there's a bunch of gunk around its mouth. It looks like those are, part of its markings, but all this discoloration around the mouth, kind of matted fur, so you can tell he's been having a rough time for his first couple of weeks of life, whereas here, now that he's been living in a home, his coat is super healthy. It looks so soft, very full. His eyes are nice and bright again. Everything's cleaned up around his mouth, so definitely in a much better situation inside. And same thing with this little guy down here. His eyes almost look like a different color because he's probably sick from something he caught out there. His fur kind of looks not as bad as this guy's, but still a little matted and gunked up. And he's also really scared. If you look at the way that he's positioned here, he's hiding between these two pieces of metal or whatever it is outside, and he's curling into a ball trying to make himself small. So you can tell just by looking at this picture how terrified he is. Whereas in this picture over here, he's super confident and, laying on this person's chair or maybe bookshelf, it looks like. He's on top of some Harry Potter books, so much, much happier, clear eyes, clear face. So you can tell just by these pictures that the cats are much happier and healthier, safer, living indoors with people who love them. So it's our responsibility to keep them healthy and safe. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another Pals and Paws live webinar. I think next week we have a break scheduled, so we will not be doing a Pals and Paws next week, but we'll be returning the following week. Thanks so much for understanding today with all the technical difficulties and for listening about outdoor and feral cats. Thanks. Bye.